Off we go. Thank you, Carrie.
All right. Tell me when you can see the screen.
Yep.
Got it?
Yep.
All right. Fabulous. Okay. Hello, Trailblazers. Welcome to day one. So excited to be with you today and to be a guest of Helen Nibs, who's such a wonderful consultant and intuitive. Love how she brings those things together to make bigger, better businesses, because making bigger, better businesses is what I do as well. So very excited to share this with you. We'll jump right in. I'll tell you, I do a lot of public speaking and I give a presentation like this in a much longer format. A lot. So I give this to industry groups and things like that. We've condensed it down to about 30 minutes. So we're going to kind of fly through and just hit the high points. Very excited for you to have the materials to look at later, because they may give you something to study or kind of come back to. So obviously, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on who I am. There's a slide that tells you about my experience. I spent 25 years as a trial lawyer, trying cases for businesses and individuals, and really learned a lot during that time about what ends up in litigation. And at the same time, what could have been done to have prevented that litigation in the first place. So when I decided to step out of the courtroom a few years ago, having worked more 3,000-hour years than I wanted to work again, I decided I wanted to turn my powers for good and really help people who are in business to grow their businesses bigger, better, faster, stronger. But and one of the ways to do that is to avoid the very time-consuming, very expensive process of litigation. So what we're going to do is we're going to avoid being one of these ships lost at sea, stuck in a boneyard, running aground because the right preparations weren't made. Because as we know, those who ignore the lessons from history are doomed to repeat its failures in the present. So this is my slide. You can come back to that when you're ready. Let's jump right into the good stuff. So what I started doing after kind of while I was still in litigation, but as I started kind of making the move to more commercial work and consulting, was I created this business health audit. And that is where, we kind of think from the end to find the beginning. It's one of my favorite sayings. I used to use it all the time as a litigator. I also use it in my business and consulting work. And the concept is whether it's the best thing that could happen or whether it's the worst thing that could happen, let's look at what the end result is. That goal that we have, that thing that we want to have happen, or the thing we want to avoid, and then let's backtrack and see how the things in our current existence compared with our experience can come together to help us avoid those pitfalls. The things that I find the most often then are on this list. And there's obviously others because we curate this for a particular business or industry. But these are the main places where risk arises for a business for litigation. Insurance, anytime you see one of those asterisks, that means we're going to talk more about it in this presentation. So I'll kind of skip over those for now. Litigation risk and claims review is something we certainly do for people in business, especially for those who've been in business for a while. If it's a new startup or a very young growth company, then we're looking more at risk and less at claims review, but those things are important to business. Resource planning, very much curated toward your business. Where are the places where those things are going to be needed, and making sure you have access to those resources when you get them. Corporate governance, structure, and affiliated entities is not something that I'm spending a lot of time with today. I'm going to assume for purposes of this presentation that you have some kind of corporate structure that protects you from the liability or litigation risks of your company. And when I say protects you, I mean protects the individual and your assets. Because a corporate structure, whether it's an LLC or a corporation or a limited partnership or something like that, is what protects you as an individual from what we'll call the sins of your company. So if your company gets sued by an employee, and there's no corporate structure, it's just you, then your personal assets are at risk. And so I'm going to assume that because you're all Trailblazers, you've taken care of those kinds of things, and we're not going to go over that. If that hasn't happened, I would encourage you to reach out, whether it's to me or someone else, to make sure that you get that done, because the first thing that always happens when litigation ensues is that the business owner will ask me, can I lose my house? Can I lose my car? Can they get my retirement accounts? Can they? And my answer is always the same. Do you have a corporate structure? And have you been maintaining it since you started the business? Those are the big issues. So an operating agreement, corporate bylaws, are you undertaking your governance protocol, having yearly meetings, making minutes, all those kinds of things. Then there's things like alter ego and piercing the corporate veil, which even if you have those kinds of structures that keep you from being your personal assets being liable, you can ruin that. You can pierce that corporate veil and let the bad stuff come in. You can be the alter ego. Your personal finances, your personal life can be the alter ego of your business. Things like using it as your personal piggy bank, paying your personal bills out of it, things like that will lead you down that very rough garden path. Succession estate planning we'll talk about. Known industry issues I'm not going to go into here for you because those will be different for all of you, but these are some of the issues that might come up. And then always remember, whatever it is that we're talking about, and when we're talking about the business of your, the health of your business, is that if you're creating it in your business, it's likely going to be discoverable. It will be reviewed by third parties. That can be potentially a government agency, an IRS audit, a Department of Labor audit, anything like that, or litigation. So you always want to be thinking about, if I had to put this email or this report or this performance review up on an 8x8 screen in front of my grandmother and 12 of her friends, is it what I would want it to say? So number one, insurance. Like Goldilocks says, do we have too much? Do we have too little? Or do we have just the right amount for your business? One of the things I see a lot is these kind of package business policies. They've got kind of a standard list of things in them. That may or may not be helpful for your business. If it's got media coverage and you don't do any media work, then you're paying for something you don't need. However, if it doesn't have business interruption coverage, and you are, I had a client one time who had a 6 or 8 inch water main break in their building, and flooded everything, and they were down for 3 weeks. And that business interruption coverage was a really big deal for them. I've seen lots of policies that didn't have it. So, making sure that you're not just getting a package policy, or that you're not getting so much insurance that, frankly, one of the things that we see is cases get too complicated. What could be a simple litigation case gets overly complicated because there's so much insurance that the plaintiff's lawyers want to just claw till they get more of it. So making sure we have just the right amount for your business is critical. Customer and contractual requirements are important. A lot of times, we're going to talk more about contracts in a minute, but a lot of times people are, just reading and signing. They're not, or they're signing and not reading is what I should say. And there can be insurance requirements in those contracts that if something happens, whether it's a act of God or some kind of force majeure issue, and then you don't have the coverage you need to have, the business is still liable for that. And many times the provisions say that particularly. So you want to make sure you're paying attention to those things. Towers and excess, these are for larger businesses. A tower is, if you have a standard liability layer, what we call a layer, just your first layer of liability coverage, liabilities for other people, right? Not for yourself. But then you have an excess or something on top of that that provides additional coverage. You may even have a personal lines excess in your personal life. The way we structure those towers, how much goes into the initial liability, how much goes into each layer above that, can really benefit the settlement process or the negotiation process in litigation. And so that's something we can deal with ahead of time. Contracts, a really big deal. Almost all of us work with contracts. You know, one of the really neat things that's coming down the pike is what's called smart contracts on blockchain technology. Those are going to really change a lot of things that we do and be really exciting. I don't think they're going to change the fact that we have to adhere to them, though. And so let's talk about adherence. I look at contracts as both a sword and a shield. And so, for instance, I may tell a business owner, you know, your bylaws are, let's say you have a partner, your bylaws are the contract, bylaws and operating agreement, I'll use it interchangeably, are the contract between you and your partners or, you know, the other members or the other shareholders within your organization. And you put that together when you all like each other. And that's true of most contracts, right? We put contracts together when we all like each other, when we're excited about doing business with one another, when we're looking forward to a new opportunity. And it's the best time to make sure that those kind of provisions are going to be good for both of us, mutual in the long run. So if something bad happens, you have a member or partner who gets divorced and all of a sudden their shares get split between, and now all of a sudden you have a disgruntled spouse in your business, your operating agreement can say no. So it becomes the shield, and no longer do you have to deal with the disgruntled spouse or your very upset partner. You say, listen, here's the shield, right? This is the document that's going to tell us how to deal with this. So you don't have to be mad at me and I don't have to deal with you because it's just this document, it's this shield, right? And then the sword can go both ways. It can be your sword against someone who's misbehaving under a contract, but it can also be their sword against you. And so you have to make sure that you're complying. So I would say technology contracts are some of the most onerous. I would really be careful with those. They can have some terrible payout provisions over a long time, even when you give notice of a cancellation or things like that. They just tend to be super onerous. Terms and conditions, click-throughs, apps, service as a software as a service. Those are also things that can have lots of buried provisions that you might not understand. And the research shows that 97% of people just click through terms and conditions, click through privacy policies and things like that, and never really look at them. And so you're really doing yourself a disservice by having yourself be submitted to a contract that you don't even know what it says. So I would encourage you to pay more attention to those things. You know, it really is to have and to hold from this day forward. Until that contract gets changed, those are the provisions that govern the business relationship. Sometimes it's better to not have a contract than it is to have a contract you don't pay attention to and comply with. That can really be problematic in litigation. And, you know, if there's an issue between the companies and you eventually go to the contract and say, well, what does it say? And then all of a sudden you realize nobody's been complying with it. And now you just have a big mess that you don't know how to figure out. And that tends to end up in litigation. So it's really, you know, agreements are only as good as they are consistent with the real life integration to your business. You know, how does it actually working in process? Insurance, what insurance you have, does it match what's in the document? Does the insurance and what's in the document match everyday life? Those are important things to know. I hear all the time, but gosh, Carrie, if we have to go to the contract, we've lost the battle, right? If we have to go to the contract, then we and the client are not on the same page. That's true. That is true. But if that's the case, wouldn't you rather know what the outcome's going to be than not know what the outcome's going to be? So the issue is, as I've said, comply with the contract as you go along, and you won't have to go there. But if you do, I'd much rather you know what the outcome's going to be. Signed but not read. You know, I see companies all the time sending contracts to their finance department or their controller or something like that, because really all they're concerned about at the time is payment terms, which is a disaster because they're not going to see liability terms and insurance terms and other things. So, you know, if you're sending it to your finance people to review payment terms, that's fine. Have them review the payment terms, but someone else needs to review the rest. Okay. Make sure you understand what your KPIs, deadlines, notices, waivers, operational requirements are. Sometimes it's good to have a summary or a key point. Again, remember those things will be discoverable. Contract management systems are great. They can be very helpful in this regard. If you're not familiar with those, let me know. I'm happy to pass along some recommendations. Employees, employment, EPL, HR, labor, you know, we kind of use all those terms interchangeably, but whatever you call them, our employees are the number one source of litigation and strife and drama in our businesses. And that usually comes because your employment situation is not well structured. It's not well constructed. You don't have good policies. There aren't regular reviews of employees, regular performance discussions. You know, there's no ladder for them to climb. Anytime, in my experience, anytime we have a lack of structure in an employment situation, that's going to lead to misbehavior. And misbehavior is best demonstrated by the fraud triangle. When these things are present, you have the most likelihood of either employee theft, and theft can be of money, of things, and of time, right? Quiet quitting and things like that that you've heard of. Weak controls, you know, financial stress, resentment because they're not paid attention to, or because they're passed over, or because family members who aren't involved in the business get more than they do, or all kinds of things. So those are some of the issues. You know your wage and hour laws. They just changed recently. In case you're not aware of that, the federal salary requirements for exempt and non-exempt employees, which is overtime related, just changed. Make sure you're aware of that. Confidentiality, non-disparagement, non-solicitation agreements. You know, all states are different relative to whether they allow non-competes, but the federal government through the Federal Trade Commission did just recently step in, and as of September 4th, have kind of put the ixnay on non-competes, other than in certain circumstances related to executives. And so, but they've also put a pretty heavy hammer on things that they call functional non-competes, which include confidentiality, non-disparagement, non-solicitation. So those things can be really helpful, but they're also becoming more and more regulated. So make sure you know kind of how that goes. I would say if anything is the best piece of advice, it's put the right people in charge and don't keep people who are causing drama and being a problem, even when they're good producers. There's a better way. So, KPIs, having a ladder, you know, these are just some of the issues you can pursue to make sure that you are not creating a situation where your employees become your biggest liability. Set clear expectations, use incentive-based compensation, which is based on key performance indicators and benchmarks, and hold people accountable. Have the hard conversations. Don't wait. I know it's hard, but think about it like ripping off a Band-Aid. It's going to take 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes to have that hard conversation versus the nightmare it could cause in the future if it's not addressed now. Having your resources ready. So whatever it is, who are you going to call, right? Are you going to call the Ghostbusters? Or are you going to call somebody who's actually going to be able to help you at that time? Business coaches, lawyers, CPAs, valuators, masters, mentors, industry specialists who might be key to your business. Things like, what are you going to do if there's an emergency or a national disaster? You know, having someone like Helen Nibs on speed dial is always a good idea. So is having your good coaches and lawyers and CPAs as well. So if you have those in advance and you know where they are and you've thought about them, you're not scrambling, losing valuable time in the event that there is some kind of emergency, whether it's a national disaster, whether it's, a global pandemic or, a fire or a flood. Succession planning, you might say, well, why are you asking me? Isn't that personal to me? Why would that be important to my business? Well, it's very important to your business. And one of the main reasons it's important to your business is highly dependent on what your goal is for your business. Do you want your business to continue after you pass, or to continue if you're unable to be the one who's in charge of it? Do you want it to pass on to your children? And what has its growth been over the last number of years? A lot of people forget that when you pass, there is a wealth tax that our government imposes on you personally. But if you and your family don't have that money, what's going to happen is your family's going to come to the business looking for that money. And you may well bankrupt the business because the government doesn't give payment plans on things like this. And it can be a real problem. So thinking through these issues, what is the succession versus closure plan? What are you going to do when you retire? Are you looking at this business as your retirement account, or are you looking at it as something that's just fun to do for now, and when it's done, and you're putting money away, for your retirement in other ways? Do you have a leadership succession for any kind of unplanned absence of yours? It's really very different how we deal with a public company that has shareholders and, all kinds of requirements, regulatory requirements, versus non-family closely held. So it may be you and your 3 best friends versus a family business. And so each one of those takes a different requirement review. You may have a lot of competing interests that determine how you're going to set up this plan. And there's a lot of psychology. I've had a number of my clients in the past tell me that I function kind of as a CTO, a chief therapy officer, because there's a lot of drama and family issues and personal, consideration and, mortality, looking at our own mortality in the face and things like that. So these are not easy issues, and they're not things you want to be doing at the last minute or that you want your family doing if you're unexpectedly absent. So what does it have to do with me now is the tax ban cometh, and the sooner you do it, the better off you're going to be when it comes time to making these plans. Marketing materials, social media, and websites. It's been a great thing. We've had all these opportunities with all of this new social media to grow our businesses, to get our messaging out there in ways that we never had before, but it lives forever, and it's always coming into evidence. And so again, I say, like I did in the beginning, if you don't want, 12 of your friends, 12 of your neighbors, 12 licensed driver's license holders in a jury, in a courtroom, looking at this material, looking at your statements, judging those concerning whatever kind of issue, whether it be an employee litigation or a contract litigation or whatever, then be more careful about it. I will tell you specifically, because I see it every day, that plaintiff lawyers, class counsel looking for class actions, and state and federal agencies are trolling social media. If they're looking at you for an audit, they've already checked out your social media. When I appear before a state agency on behalf of a client, one of the first things that comes across the table at me is the prints of the website, and they say X, Y, and Z, or prints of social media that are somehow supporting what the government wants to do. So very important information there. Leadership, culture, and communication. So, if you're here, if you're a Trailblazer and you've been working with Helen, or you're interested in working with Helen, then you know how important our intuition is to us. And, things like leadership, culture, and communication are not woo-woo. They are absolutely related to your returns on investment. What you are putting into your business from a time standpoint, from a monetary standpoint, is absolutely going to be directly related to how strong is your leadership, culture, and communication. There's all kinds of research that talks about the costs of hire, whether it's recruiting, training, onboarding, the learning curve, the cost of term, whether it's managing the conflict coming into that, the cost and time of your managers in determining, is this person a fit? Are they not a fit? Can we move them here? What else can we do? If you're not familiar with how terminations affect the unemployment score that you have with the unemployment department in your state, how many people leave your organization, how many times you hire and fire in a given period, goes into determining your score, which then goes into determining how much you pay as an unemployment rate. And so a lot of people are like, just get rid of them. It's no big deal. Well, after you've done that so many times, it actually becomes a big deal because your unemployment score begins to tick up and then your unemployment rate begins to tick up. The amount you pay into the unemployment fund in your particular state or jurisdiction. Reputation management is a big deal. Things like Glassdoor and Indeed keep information on employers and what it's like to work for those employers. And so that information be out there. I've had clients call me and say, I need to start a new company, kind of an affiliated entity, because the reviews on my company are so bad I can't hire anymore. Okay, that happens. And so don't get there. That's a problem, right? There are better ways to address leadership. Productivity, quiet quitting, water cooler talk, drama, infighting, fear in the workplace. None of that is going to help your company grow. And the way to combat that is, leadership that is based in integrity and candor, that is not based on shame, blame, and intimidation, coming at it from a heart-centered perspective. I teach a lot of leadership and heart-centered perspective. One of my favorite books is 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. If you don't have it, get it. But and then when things get really bad, you get yourself into things like employee fraud and then litigation. All the causes of workplace conflict, right? So get help ahead of time. This is the number one thing that I see that keeps people out of trouble. And that is, when you have that resource list, pick up the phone. And I understand, right? Let's go ahead and talk. Let's have the hard discussion, right? I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to have the hard discussion. Let's have a word or two about lawyers. I am one. I bill when you call me. That is true, unless I do this really cool outside general counsel program that's curated to your business, and it's a monthly fee, so it's easier and people don't worry about what happens. Because I hear this all the time. I don't want to call the lawyer because I'm going to get an invoice and it's going to have like $250 for a 20-minute phone call and it makes me crazy and I just can't stand it. Okay, I get it. Then negotiate something different, because not getting the help and making mistakes that cost you way more, hundreds of times more than a $200 phone call in the future is not the answer. So whether it's CPAs or business consultants or anybody else, you may say, I don't have time, or I don't know where to start. Okay, well, get that resource list in place, or have somebody like me or Helen or your favorite CPA who knows who to call, even if you don't, and get that help in advance. I hear you when you say they take too long to respond. And I get it. And that means you're probably working with the wrong people, right? They need to be focused on, they need to understand that business operates at the speed of business, and lawyers have to operate at the speed of business as well. And so if yours isn't doing that, then let's get you a new one. Whether that's me or whether that's somebody else, that's fine. But business operates at the speed of business, and so should your support team. I just want a yes or a no. It gets so complicated. I get it. And I have to tell you, it is complicated. I wish it weren't. It's just rare for there to be a yes or a no. And it's going to be things like, what does the contract say? What has been, if you didn't have a contract, what has been your course of dealing up to now? Because that's what the law is going to look at. It may be, what's the outcome? What's the goal you're looking for? Because if you're looking to end a relationship with a client, then then approaching that contractual problem is going to be one thing. If you're looking to continue it or grow it, it may be another. So there's always going to be issues, and a good lawyer, a good CPA, a good business consultant is going to ask you those questions. And I know it may not be the yes, go that you want or the no, stop that you don't want. But you have to understand that our job is to give you the bigger picture, and your job is to take in that information and then make the best decision that you can from it. Same with, they always say no. Well, if your lawyer or your CPA always says no, again, you've got the wrong one, because my favorite saying is, I may tell you that's not the right way, but then I'll tell you, let's find a better way, because that's what we should be doing, right? So if your support team doesn't do that, let's get you one that does. Ask about flat fees, project-based fees, ask about upfront estimates. Require updates, communicate, don't wait. And all of a sudden you get this $20,000 bill and you're like, wait, I don't understand where that came from. Well, that doesn't happen if you're communicating consistently. So that's all very important. So that's it for me. I flew through that. I hope that was helpful. If you're a Trailblazer here with Helen's program, always happy to do those free what keeps you up at night consultations. You tell us what your problems are, and we'll help you get a game plan together and potentially put a plan in place for you that will help you grow your business and sleep better at night. So it's been great to be with you. I'm very excited. If we have any time left and anybody has questions, I'm happy to take those.
Carrie, thank you so much for that. That was amazing. And I made some notes about things that I'd like to ask you about. And I do hope some people will reach out after this live is finished, because you are in the group. So I hope they reach out to you and ask you some questions too, because, you know, and I think it was one of the last things you were saying about finding the right lawyer for you. I think that is so true. When you're looking for a law firm or an attorney, then it's interview them. You know, have a chat with them. They're not going to mind, because you really need to find the best fit for you and for what you need. In my previous CEO role, we actually worked with 2 law firms, because we had 2 different sides of the business. One was very association based and the other was very data driven, data-based. And you know, there's a lot of you really need an attorney who's extremely specialized in data to deal with that. So that's what we had. And then the other one dealt with more business issues. But absolutely, talk to attorneys, interview them really, and check that you've got the right fit, because law is it's not a precise science. It's a bit of an art there as well. So you've got to I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but you've got to
Absolutely true. Yeah. They
right
don't call it the practice of law for no reason.
Right, exactly. And that didn't surprise me too much. What did surprise me was talking to some tax professionals, and it seemed to apply to them as well. And I'm like,
it does.
Okay, if you're telling me that tax is not an absolute, then I just
I
don't even know where I am in the universe anymore.
I know.
I know, but so it is so important, and I'm really glad you said that. I liked what you were talking about, the succession plan, because, you know, if you're in business or in corporate world or anything, the succession planning can be an extremely touchy issue. If you have investors and stuff, they may be looking for a succession plan, and then you might get the person who's heading the company be kind of offended by that. They're like, what do you mean a succession plan? Why do you think I'm going somewhere? Am I going somewhere? You know, and it can go the other way too. But I think it's so important to get that succession plan in place so that everyone knows where they are, where they're going, and what can happen. Because you really just never know what's going to happen in life out of the blue. So this can help people have a roadmap in case something happens. And you know, the same with this being a crisis communication. I would throw that in there with this kind of planning. It's kind of it's almost like rainy day planning. You know, it's just like,
true. Yeah, and that's the
Yeah.
slide on the who you gonna call, because you have to have the rainy day plan. I mean, I've gotten the 5 a.m. call from the client that says there's been a terrible accident. It's going to be all over the news. What do we do? And,
Right.
I can handle some of that. Not all lawyers can, but I also have a really great roster of people to call when we need crisis communications done.
Right.
And, that particular day we were there before the media got there, and we were able to handle things, and it actually, kind of worked in our benefit to be to be Johnny on the spot. But if you're not prepared for it, it'll eat your lunch.
It will. And some of those crises can come from within the company. It could be a disgruntled employee, and it can
Mhm.
come from without as well. It can be some kind of national crisis that happens that impacts your industry. So you just really never know what's going to happen. So it's always good to have those people with their number handy that you've met before that you can call. Definitely very interesting what you were saying about employees being the main area of litigation. I think anyone who's had a staff before will agree that that can actually be such an issue, and it can certainly be an area that causes issues. Sometimes it can be, if it's been your company all along and you've hired everyone in, perhaps it's different. But a lot of the time, if you're coming into a role and there's already employees in place, you often find that previous leaders have ignored a lot of issues. And they've let it go because they're like, oh, that one's a problem, but I just don't want to deal with it, because HR is not always a fun issue. So I would absolutely agree with you that employees can be a huge area for litigation. And some of the things that employees do, you're just like, I can't believe
Oh,
that.
I can't even tell you the number of phone calls I've gotten that have been, I can't even put words around what this employee just did, but I don't know what to do about it. It's just
Yep.
crazy.
Yes. We could all probably write a book on that, but
Exactly.
we'd have to change the names, as we'd be hiring you to defend us.
to, to protect the innocent or non-innocent.
Right. And I did love what you were talking about with the reputation management and the leadership communication. Huge. That is so huge. And I think what you see a lot of the times with leadership communication, through whether it's to their own staff, whether it's to their own investors, whether it's to the world at large, a lot of leaders really don't do it, or they don't do it well, or they don't seem to realize they should be doing it. Because
Exactly.
if you've got a leader who's a real visionary, and they know what's going on with their company and they know where they want it to go, they kind of forget to step outside their own head a lot of the times and forget that not everyone's up in there with them, and they need to bring everybody else on the journey with them. It can be a bit of a
I
challenge.
completely agree. And I ran my own law firm for 25 years before I stepped out, into consulting on my own. And it often happened that, I had this great idea, and it made perfect sense in my head, but then I would give that to my staff, who were all different personalities than me and had different gifts than I did. And they would look at me like, have you lost your mind? And I would be like, no, 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 this, and maybe after a while we would get there, but communication was very important to me. And so I sat down and communicated until we all got on the same page. But there can be lots of times where a leader just issues an edict and expects it to flow through seamlessly because that's the way it does in her head, but it doesn't. And lots of fallout that you can get, some employee issues, people can read into those the wrong way. And now all of a sudden you have issues where you thought you were doing something great and grand, and now you've got drama and water cooler talk and things that you've got to deal with.
You do, because if you're going to take your company forward, even if it's 6 inches that week, then it's probably going to affect someone. And a lot of the time, employees, they may feel uncertain about that. They're like, wait, hold on, if we start doing this, then how's it going to affect my job? because, you know, it'd be really nice to think that every single employee that you had was there for the bigger picture and they wanted everything to succeed and they were all in it for the team and nothing else mattered apart from that. But, you know, at the end of the day, people are going to be concerned about their jobs, their paycheck, and they're in their own little world. So it's like how to communicate what the vision is doing down to that person so it helps them understand what role they play in it and what they can do to help with the bigger vision. That makes such a huge difference. So
Agreed.
yeah, if something's having to change, explaining to each person, going, this is what might change for you, but this is why it's awesome, and this is what we can do to make it better, and make everyone feel like a team member. Because, and I've talked about this before, you know, when I started my career here, you know, in Mary, I was answering phones at a front desk, but never once did the CEO or anything come out and be like, hey, Helen, you are the first person that anyone talks to when they call the company. So really, what you say matters. And this is what our company is about. And this is what we'd love you to say. No one said that. They're like, just pick up the phone, just answer the phones 8 till 5, you know?
Yep.
And
See it all the time.
all the time. And really that frontline person sets the tone for your culture. You know, I mean, how many times have you called like a doctor's office or, you know, whatever the other day, and they're like, yeah, what do you want? That's very much the attitude. Make an appointment. But it makes such a huge difference with who you get and what the culture is. And that really comes down from the top.
It does. Absolutely, it
Yeah,
does.
yeah, it does. And I think when you've got a leader who is making everyone feel valued, I think that comes across in their interactions with someone else. And I think another huge part of that is a leader who lets people know that they have everyone's back. Because
Absolutely.
you're always going to have, you know, whether it's a difficult customer, a difficult client, a difficult situation. But if your initial reaction is like, hey, tell me what happened and then we'll deal with it, rather than, oh my God, that other person is obviously right. What did you do? You know,
Right.
that comes across really well too.
Now, it's but one of my very favorite leadership sayings is lead with curiosity. Just lead with curiosity. Because when you lead with judgment, nothing good comes of it. Lead with
Right.
curiosity.
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Find out what's going on. Oh my gosh. Well, I just learned so much from your presentation today, Carrie, and I'm so glad that you were here and you got us kicked off right. Okay. So thank you for sharing all this wonderful information. And I know this is real speed viewing
It
of,
is.
of what you do. So I do hope that people get in touch with you and have a couple more questions, because it could be, and I'm just looking at the screen that's in front of me, the succession planning. People like, what's that? Hadn't even thought about that. Do I even need it? You know? Yes, even if it's a very short succession plan, but just something, you know? So yeah, I do. So yes, please reach out to
Absolutely.
Carrie and she will be more than happy to have a chat with you. Um, yes, so thank you so very much, Carrie. I'm gonna,
Thank you. Love you and everything you do for this industry. I appreciate you and am honored that you chose me to be part of your program.
well, thank you so much. So blessed to have you here. Thanks. Thanks
All
everyone.
right. Bye.
Bye.